Hi there and welcome to Beaux-Arts Creative University's free ECD course. Today's lesson will be on social development. Now, social development in the preschool years involves changes in a preschooler's interaction and relationships with others. Family relationships continue to play a crucial role, but from the age of 2, peers and other people become increasingly influential. As always, all links, resources, and references will be put in the description below. We hope that the lessons will provide parents with a more psychological understanding of their children. So, who am I? My name is Vincent. My mother started a company when she was pregnant with me, and now I'm working for that company with her. Beaux-Art is an extracurricular company that specializes in developing whole brain creativity in children. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the following handle @BACreate, or you can check us out online at www.bacreate.com. So without further ado, let's get cracking. We'll be starting off with family relationships. Now, family relationships constitute the most influential factors in early childhood development. However, these relationships reflect both continuity and change. The preschooler is attached to his or her family as an infant while at the same time struggles to establish independence. Attachment and parenting styles are crucial in this phase, while sibling relationships contribute greatly to the preschooler's social relationships. Alrighty, so we'll start off with parents or caregivers, and in terms of that, let's look at attachment first. By the age of 12 months, infants have normally established a clear attachment to their primary caregiver. Preschoolers continue to show powerful attachments to their parents or caregivers, but the manifestation of this bond begins to change. By the age of 2 or 3, many attachment behaviors have become less visible. They are less distressed while separated from their parents and are cognitively advanced enough to understand the explanation from their caregiver why they must go away for a while and when they will be back. By the age of 3 or 4, children may use communication offered by the parents to lessen their anxiety. For example, when a parent says that they'll be back after their nap time. Although they will seek proximity and closeness, toddlers and preschoolers are able to move further from the safe base without apparent distress, especially in non-frightening or non-stressful situations. This new form of attachment is often called goal-corrected partnership. The infant's goal is always to have the attachment figure within sight or touch, while the preschooler's goal is still to be in contact with the parent. This contact no longer requires a constant physical presence. The preschooler not only understands that the parent continues to exist when they are not there, but now also understands that the relationship continues to exist even though they are apart. This enables children to correct or modify their goal of contact with the attachment figure by engaging in collaborative planning. For example, by agreeing when and how they will be together, what the child can do if he or she gets scared, or who the replacement security person will be. Attachment quality also influences various aspects of children's development in the preschool years. Securely attached preschoolers seem to experience fewer behavioral problems, while insecurely attached preschoolers seem to experience more anger and aggression towards both peers and adults in social settings. It should be remembered that attachment is not only the factor in children's favorable or unfavorable outcomes. For example, in some contexts in South Africa, infant attachments are generally secure, yet high rates of infant disturbance occur among children of school age. However, these research... Oops, I lost my place there, so let me rather restart from in some contexts in South Africa. So in some contexts in South Africa, infant attachments are generally secure, yet high rates of behavior disturbance occur among children of school age. How early attachment patterns either become modified or else translate into subsequent maladaptive patterns of functioning needs to be investigated urgently. However, these researchers believe that attachment is fundamentally about relationships. Therefore, they argue that the provision of supportive relationships to parents and the promotion of good parent-child relationships should be at the core of all early intervention models. So let us move on to parenting style. As children begin to function more independently, conflicts between parent and child may arise. Of course, parents may vary in their reactions to children's increasing demands, Psychologists have tried to identify those parenting styles that are most beneficial to children's developments. One of the most influential psychologists in this regard is Diana Baumrind. Baumrind has focused on the following dimensions of parenting, which can be seen in the slideshow below in that little table. Now, on the x-axis we have consistent control expectations, and on the y-axis we have warmth and nurturance communication. So warmth and nurturance. Children with warm and nurturing parents are generally more securely attached than children of cold and detached parents. They generally show positive development in most areas. Parental warmth may even buffer a child against the negative effects of otherwise dangerous environments, such as poor and tough neighborhoods. Consistent control. Parents who set clear rules and consistently apply them usually have children who are less likely to be defiant or non-compliant. The form of control is also important. The most optimal outcomes for children occur when parents are not overly restrictive, explain things to the child, and avoid the use of physical punishment. Moving on to expectations. Children of parents who have high expectations of them also tend to fare better, specifically regarding their self-esteem and altruistic behaviors. And moving back to communication. Open, clear, and regular communication between parents and child has been linked to positive outcomes. Listening to the child is just as important as talking to him or her. In this way, the parent communicates to the child that what he or she has to say is important. Children of such parents tend to be more emotionally and socially mature. Now, these dimensions of family interaction do not occur in isolation but in combination, which is the middle part of the table. So let us first look at the authoritative parenting style. This is also called, as can be seen, the authoritative reciprocal. Now, these parents meet the standards of all four dimensions: warmth and nurturance, consistent control, expectations, and communication. It involves high acceptance and involvement, adaptive control techniques, and the granting of appropriate autonomy. Parents are warm and sensitive to the children's needs, but set appropriate limits. The style is regarded as the most successful approach to child rearing and is linked to many aspects of competence throughout childhood and adolescence. These include a positive mood, self-control, task persistence, cooperativeness, social and moral maturity, and favorable school performance. Now, moving down to the authoritarian parenting style, or the authoritative power assertive. This style is high in control and expectations, but low in nurturance and communication. Authoritarian parents appear cold and rejecting. They frequently degrade their children by putting them down. To exert control, they shout, command, and criticize. If the child disobeys, they resort to force and punishment. Outcomes for these children are generally negative. They tend to be unhappy and anxious, show high rates of anger and defiance, and tend to be dependent and overwhelmed by challenging tasks. The next parenting style we look at is the permissive parenting style, which is top left, the permissive indulgent. These parents show warmth and nurturance, but fail as far as expectations, control, and communication are concerned. Parents are generally warm and accepting, but rather than being involved, they tend to be overindulgent and inattentive. They exert little control over their children's behavior, with the result that children have to make many of their own decisions at an age when they are not yet capable of doing so. Children of permissive parents tend to be impulsive, disobedient, and rebellious. They also tend to be overly demanding and dependent on adults and show less persistence in tasks than children whose parents have more control and expectation demands. Lastly, we will look at the uninvolved parenting style, or the uninvolved neglectful. These parents do not meet the expectations of any of the parenting styles. They tend to be emotionally detached, often because of their own overwhelming problems or because they are attracted to more exciting activities. They tend to have little time and energy left to cater to their children's needs. At its extreme, uninvolved parents often maltreat their children by neglecting them. This style disrupts virtually all aspects of development, including attachment, recognition, emotional, and social skills. Despite the general agreement on the advantages and disadvantages of these parenting styles, it is equally true that the correlations between parenting style and expected child behavior are not always strong. The expected child outcomes do not always realize and sometimes have the opposite result. For example, parents with authoritative parenting styles could have children who are rebels or are guilty of antisocial conduct. Various factors such as cultural variations, the personality of the parents and the child, social economic status, and access to the extended family also remind us that child-rearing practices should be understood in a broader context. Moving on to the sibling relationships. Now, sibling relationships play a very different role from parents and peers in socialization. For example, sibling conflicts may become a means for understanding social relationships. Correlations between the quality of sibling relationships and peer relationships also seem to exist. This suggests that lessons and skills learned from sibling relationships are applied to situations and relationships outside of the home. The nature of sibling relationships changes throughout the developmental phases. Infants become attached to their older brothers or sisters. As they begin to move around, become more active and assertive, conflict with siblings inevitably arises. Sibling conflicts increases significantly after the child reaches 18 months of age. As cognitive and social understanding develops, sibling conflicts tend to become more constructive, and the younger sibling participates in attempts to reconcile the conflict. The most frequent and intense disputes among preschool-aged siblings are over the rights of possession, such as who owns a toy and who may play with it. Sibling disputes and their settlement may be viewed as opportunities in socialization. They learn how to fight, how to disagree, and compromise within a safe environment. When and how do parents intervene when siblings fight? Psychologists are of the opinion that parents should intervene. This intervention takes place in the form of teaching children appropriate ways to deal with disputes. If conflict is left unchecked, it may, over time, lead to behavior problems in school. Furthermore, parents contribute largely to the quality of sibling relationships, both directly and indirectly. The direct influence stems from the parents' treatment of siblings. Siblings tend to get along more often when they believe parents have no favorites and treat all siblings fairly. When parents praise one child's accomplishments while ignoring another's, children notice a difference, and this negatively affects their relationships. The indirect influence stems from the quality of the parents' relationships with each other. For example, a warm, harmonious relationship between parents fosters positive sibling relationships, while conflict between the parents is associated with conflict between siblings. As with younger children, the birth of a sibling is often distressing for older children. They may become withdrawn or return to more childish behavior in order to regain their parents' attention and affection. However, distress can be avoided if parents remain warm and responsive to older children's needs and engage with them in activities. Many older children enjoy helping their parent take care of infants. In middle-class, Western-orientated cultures, this caregiving often occurs in the context of play, with parents nearby. Parents generally do not burden older children with the care of younger ones. Although some care takes place, this is generally sporadic. Older siblings do teach younger ones, but this usually happens informally and is not established custom of the social system. But if we look at cultures in Africa, Asia, Oceania, and Central and South America, care of younger children by older siblings is part of the social system. Older children play an important culturally defined role in care, such as feeding, comforting, toilet training, and disciplining. And they also have teaching roles, such as cultural values and chores. Siblings do fight and compete, but they do so in the societal rules and Now let's look at peer relationships. The development of friendships with peers is one of the most important aspects of preschoolers' social development. As they develop more self-awareness, become more effective in communicating, and better at understanding the thoughts and feelings of others, their skills in interacting with others develop remarkably. Moving on to play. Play is an excellent example of the interdependence among dimensions of development. Gains in language development make communication with peers possible in the second life stage, so that when they play together, preschoolers can talk about what they are doing. In their play, preschoolers share affection, offer approval, and make demands on one another, providing valuable learning opportunities and social interaction. Not only that, but play also offers preschoolers opportunities in visual spatial skills, thus enhancing their cognitive development. The various types of play reflect children's development during preschool years, such as functional play. Now this refers to repetitive activities such as skipping, jumping, rolling clay, or moving toy cars. This type of play involves activity and does not have the goal of creating some end result. This type of play involves gross and fine motor development as well as body movement. Then we go to constructive play, which involves children manipulating objects or toys to make something such as a tower from blocks or a house from clay. This type of play encourages children to practice their fine motor and cognitive skills, for example, how pieces fit together to build a tower or complete a puzzle. Then we move through to social pretend play. This is also called socio-dramatic or fantasy play. This is one of the most interesting forms of play seen in preschoolers, in which they use make-believe to change the functions of objects, such as a stick becomes a horse, and then they also create imaginary situations such as riding a magic carpet, or they enact pretend roles such as playing mommy or daddy. These play activities reflect children's growth in cognitive perspective taking and communication skills. For example, to pretend a stick is a horse, children must develop symbolic capabilities to allow them to let one object represent another. To play mommy, a child must relinquish their own perspective and appreciate another's role. In complex pretend plays such as when one child acts as a mommy and another as a crying baby, children learn to understand the rules of social dialogue and communication. And lastly, games with rules, such as hide-and-seek, board games, and hopscotch, provide opportunities for cognitive development and social understanding. In a classical study on children's play, Mildred Parton indicated that children's play proceeds in sequence from solitary play, in which a child plays individually and apart from other children, to parallel play, where children play near other children but do not influence their behavior, to cooperative play, where children interact by sharing, following one another, and making suggestions. Parton believed that a stage-like developmental progression takes place from solitary to cooperative play. Recent researchers believe that all three forms of play occur among preschoolers. Parents often wonder if a preschooler who spends much time alone is developing, in quotation marks, normally. Most preschoolers enjoy playing by themselves, and their solitary activities are usually positive and constructive. Only extremes of non-social activities such as aimless wandering, hovering near peers, and inappropriate repetitive motor action are cause for concern. Another concern often raised by parents is the presence of an imaginary friend. This is a friend who does not really exist, but who is very real to the child, has a name and is about the same age as the child. This common and normal phenomenon reflects the richness of a child's fantasy and imagination. Children with imaginary companions are no less sociable or confused about reality or fantasy than children without imaginary companions. Now the question comes up, do children in all cultures play the same? Now cultural variations do seem to occur. Peer sociability in collectivist cultures takes different forms from individualistic cultures. Children in collectivist cultures such as some African or Indian cultures play in large groups that require high levels of cooperation and encouragement in conversation and dramatic play. Children in individualistic cultures prefer two people or smaller groups and tend to focus on movements and objects. Cultural beliefs about the importance of play also affect early play behavior. Adults who view play as mere entertainment are less likely to provide play material and encourage pretend play than those who value its social and cognitive benefits. It also seems that children who have had experience in child care settings or playgroups are more likely to engage in more social forms of play, such as cooperative play earlier in their life than children who do not. Now moving on to aggressive behavior. Aggression refers to physical or verbal behavior intended to injure or harm someone else. Two types of aggression may be identified during early childhood: instrumental and hostile. Now, instrumental aggression refers to aggression being used as a means to an end, for example, as an instrument to obtain something. Children are usually not deliberately hostile but shout, push, or attack someone in order to get something. Now, on the other hand, hostile aggression is intended to hurt someone deliberately by hitting, kicking, or insulting them. Aggression is no longer a means to an end, but an end in itself. Aggression in children usually emerges at 1 to 2 years of age, this period during which children begin to interact more with other children. Disputes over objects, privileges, and territorial space are usually the instigators of aggression during the preschool years and are initially predominantly instrumental in nature. For example, Lorato may push James off the bike not to hurt him, but to get the bike back. This does not mean, however, that all children will be aggressive in these situations. In many cases, preschoolers are able to solve their conflicts without resorting to aggression. They would, for instance, offer or show the hostile friend an alternative object rather than fight over the desired object. From their brief struggles, children learn which type of behavior is more successful in obtaining a desired object. These experiences may influence their future interaction styles. For example, should children realize that they can obtain or keep a desired toy through aggressive behavior, they may develop aggressive interaction styles. If, however, they notice that sharing is more successful, they may acquire more prosocial interaction styles such as empathy and altruism. Instrumental aggression diminishes as preschoolers grow older because they develop greater emotional control and are able to compromise over the ownership of a desired object. Hostile aggression, however, increases between 4 and 7 years. This increase in hostile aggression is related to children's increasing ability to recognize the intentions of others. For example, older children can recognize deliberate maliciousness in others and are inclined to retaliate. Although this developmental pattern occurs in both genders, boys are more inclined to be physically and verbally aggressive than girls. This phenomenon has been reported in several cultures. After the age of 6, boys still show more physical aggression than girls do, although the findings for verbal aggression are not as conclusive. We have to keep in mind that the occasional aggressive interaction between young children is normal and to be expected. These disputes between children are characteristic of their developmental self-definition. However, excessive aggression may cause problems for the child's development. Aggressive tendencies tend to remain stable, which implies that the aggressive preschooler may become an aggressive adult. In fact, aggression in children seems to be the best predicator of future maladjustment. This does not mean that all aggressive children will become maladapted aggressive adults. Because aggression may contribute towards problematic behavior later, we shall consider the causes of aggression and ways to control aggression in children below. So the various theories on the causes of aggression are as follows: instinct theories, biological factors, frustration aggression hypothesis, cognitive factors, and social factors. According to instinct theories, aggression is part of the evolutionary survival process of humans, and therefore we are programmed to act aggressively in certain situations. These theories assume that aggression is an inherent responsive characteristic of the whole human species. However, because of the vast differences between individuals and cultures regarding aggression, psychologists today no longer accept that aggression is simply an evolutionary, inborn, and instinctive response. Let's look at the biological factors. Some psychologists believe that reactions to stimuli are activated by biological systems. According to this theory, certain brain areas and hormones play an important role in the tendency to act aggressively. Generic factors also seem to play a role. For example, studies of identical and non-identical twins show aggressive behavior like other personality characteristics could have a genetic basis. Moving on to the third one. Now, this hypothesis suggests that individuals experience frustration when the attainment of the goal is blocked. The inevitable reaction to this is aggression. For example, Johnny will throw a tantrum in Pick and Pay when his mother refuses to buy a coveted toy. This theory initially met with resounding approval. However, theorists soon realized that not all aggression is caused by frustration, and that not all frustration leads to aggression. Therefore, the frustration-aggression hypothesis was reformulated. This reformulated version states that the frustration may cause aggression because frustrating events may elicit negative feelings. Toddlers and preschoolers are often frustrated because they cannot always do what they want and because they cannot express their needs clearly. They often express their frustration through aggression. As children acquire greater ability to communicate, plan, and organize their activities, their frustration levels declines and their overt aggression becomes less. Let's look at cognitive factors. Theories also considered cognitive factors as explanation for aggression. This viewpoint deals with children's interpretations of their social environments, as well as their views and assumptions regarding aggression. The following are examples of this viewpoint. Number 1. One of the core determinants of aggression is a child's understanding of the intentions of the other person. Number 2. Aggression is caused by an inability to process social information adequately. Number 3. Aggressive children view the outcomes or results of aggression differently to non-aggressive children. Now let's quickly go back to number 1. So it says, one of the core determinants of aggression is the child's understanding of the intentions of the other person. When children believe that their peers are deliberately hostile, they will be more inclined to retaliate with aggression than when they believe that the action was accidental. Aggressive children seem to differ from non-aggressive children regarding their interpretations of a social situation. In situations where peers' intentions are unclear, aggressive children will be more likely to attribute hostile motives to them than non-aggressive children. And then moving on to number 2. This says aggression is caused by inability to process social information adequately. For example, during interaction with their peers, aggressive children tend not to consider all available social cues, but to focus on aggressive cues. They then wrongly interpret that their social environment is a hostile place and retaliate with aggression. And then thirdly, aggressive children view the outcomes or results of aggression differently to non-aggressive children. Aggression may lead to tangible rewards, such as getting what they want, or other children will leave them alone. Moreover, aggressive children do not seem to be concerned about the consequences of aggression. Additionally, aggressive children do not view themselves negatively because of their aggressive behavior. These outcomes may contribute towards the continuation of the aggressive behavior, because the children's interpretation is that aggression holds no negative consequences for him or her. Okay, now let's move on to the social factors. Social learning theorists believe that children learn aggressive behavior through the reinforcement of such behavior and the imitation of aggressive models such as parents and the media. So let's firstly look at parents. Many psychologists believe that the parents play a vital role in their children's aggressive behavior. Two dimensions of parenting styles are of particular importance in this regard, namely the type of nurturance a child receives and the disciplinary strategies that parents follow. Children whose parents are cold, negative, hostile, and rejecting towards them tend to be more aggressive than children whose parents are warm and positive. The reason for this could be that parents' negative behavior may cause frustration in the children because their emotional needs are not met. Therefore, they react with aggressive behavior. Parents who use strict and punitive disciplinary strategies such as physical punishment and verbal aggression have children who also show aggressive interaction styles. When parents use physical punishment, they are in fact acting as powerful models of aggression. Through their parents' actions, children learn that they can control others by hitting or threatening them. In addition, when parents settle their own mutual disputes through aggression, children gradually begin to view their world as a violent and hostile place in which acting aggressively becomes a way of life. On the other hand, when parents use permissive parenting styles by not providing their children with guidelines regarding aggressive behavior, children also tend to be aggressive. The reason for this is probably because that permissive parenting styles set no boundaries for the children's behavior, thereby implying that everything is permissible. Furthermore, permissive parenting styles are often inconsistent with applying punishment, which means that children are sometimes punished for aggression and at other times not. Children therefore receive confusing messages as to which behavior is permitted and which is not. The result is that a child may never learn that aggressive behavior is unacceptable. Let's look at community violence. Exposure to community violence may have an important influence on the aggressive behavior of both parents and their children. For example, a significant relationship exists between parents' exposure to community violence and their aggression levels, particularly when they are victims of violence. This aggression also has negative influence on their parenting styles. Parents are more aggressive, punitive, and rejecting towards their children. There is also a significant relationship between children's observation of or exposure to community violence and their levels of aggression. This means that the more children witness community violence, the higher their levels of aggression. And lastly, let us look at the media. Media violence, such as portrayed on television and in electronic games, has an important influence on the child's behavior. Worldwide, children start viewing television at an early age. Children of different ages watch and understand television in different ways, depending on the length of their attention spans, the way in which they process information, and the amount of mental effort they invest on their own life experiences. Some studies indicate that children start watching television fairly regularly at 6 months of age, and by 2 or 3 years they are already ardent television viewers. The time children spend viewing television seems to follow a developmental curve. Children viewing time reaches a peak during the late preschool years. When children start school, their television time drops as their days are filled with school-related activities. Another peak is reached just before adolescence, followed by a decline during the high school years. As mentioned earlier, what is important is not the amount of time children spend watching television, but the content of the program material. Especially the incidence of television violence and its effect on children, adolescents, and adults have been receiving continued widespread research attention. Cartoons, particularly favored by children because of their vivid production features such as rapidly changing scenes and intense sights and sounds, contain about 20 to 25 violent acts per hour, as opposed to an average of 6 violent incidents of mostly family-oriented programs screened during prime time viewing. Young children also favor animated movies or DVDs. However, these media often tend to contain more violent acts as opposed to non-animated films. A common theme seems to be that the good guys triumph over the bad guys using physical force. Even comedy films contain acts of violence. Another area of concern is the amount of violence portrayed in the news and in reality shows. What is particularly alarming is that violence in the media seems to be on the increase. The question that arises is what the effect of this violence may have on the children. So, meta-analysis have shown that the following main effects of watching a lot of violent entertainment. There is the desensitization effect, the aggressor effect, the victim effect, the bystander effect, and the appetite effect. Let's start off with the desensitization effect. Now, this refers to the reduction or eradication of cognitive, emotional, and ultimately also behavioral responses. Continued exposure to violence portrayed as justified and fun, first in cartoons watched in childhood and continued in other programming in adolescence and adulthood. This causes systematic violence desensitization, which has long-term negative effects. Moving on to the aggressor effect. Some children and adults tend to become meaner, more aggressive, and more violent as a result of exposure to violence. The victim effect. Both children and adults tend to see the world as a scarier place, become more fearful, and initiate more self-protective measures. The bystander effect. Both children and adults tend to become more desensitized to violence, both in media and in real life, and more callous and less sympathetic to victims of violence. And lastly, the appetite effect. Both children and young adults tend to develop an increased appetite for seeing more violent entertainment. Children under the age of 8 years are particularly vulnerable to television violence. A reason for this may be that young children do not always understand the context in which the violence occurs because they cannot combine the separate scenes into a meaningful storyline. They are therefore not always aware of the motives for the aggression or of the consequences of aggression. For the preschooler, the aggressors who kick, hit, or shoot are not necessarily the bad guys, and they do not always recognize that the aggressors are brought to justice. In addition, preschoolers are not always able to distinguish fantasy from reality. They accept that what they see on television reflects their world. These misconceptions contribute towards children's willingness to imitate TV characters. Television violence is not the only media violence children are exposed to. Children are also exposed to violent music, movies, the internet, and video and other electronic games, as well as arcade games. Most research to date has been on video games, but if the interactive nature of the internet and other electronic games is considered, there may be a connection. Video games are more popular with older children than with younger children, but playing tapers off during late adolescence. Video game playing is a gender-typed activity. More boys than girls play video games, while boys are also more likely than girls to play violent video games. Although video games are designed to be entertaining, challenging, and sometimes educational, most include violent content, largely because of children's preference for violent games. Content analysis of video games has shown that as much as 89% of games contain some violent content, and that about half of the games include violent content towards other game characters and results in serious injuries or death. There are indications that violent games may have been an even greater impact than violent television. Video games appear to increase aggressive thoughts and feelings, psychological arousal, and aggressive behaviors, as well as decreasing prosocial behaviors. The main reasons for this is the interactive nature of video and internet games, which include forced identification with the aggressive character and practicing an entire sequence of behavior, such as winning points for aggressive acts. However, not all children who watch violent television content or engage in violent video games show negative outcomes. Children at risk tend to have poor problem-solving skills, poor emotional regulation skills, are generally more hostile in personality, and have poor parental control. Now, although we have highlighted a few causes of aggression in children, one should always keep in mind that no single factor causes aggression. Various factors in children's background, such as parenting styles, the personality of a child, environmental stresses, and culture interact with one another and will ultimately determine the child's level of aggression. Now, there's no point in just naming all the causes of aggression. We must be proactive and see how we can control aggression in children. The following are guidelines that can be used by parents and other caregivers to help children control their aggression. Parents are powerful models. They should therefore ensure that their own interaction styles are not aggressive. That's the first guideline. Second, firmness is of the utmost importance. Parents should never give in to a child's aggressive behavior. Thirdly, parents should make less of power assertion and more of induction. Now, power assertion is physical punishment, threats, and insults, and induction is reasoning, explaining, and setting limits of behavior. Number 4. Children's cognitions regarding their consequences of aggression can be changed by explaining to them that their behavior harms other people. Fifth, children should be encouraged to practice pro-social behavior. So what is pro-social behavior? Pro-social behavior is any voluntary action that is intended to benefit another individual. It includes positive actions such as empathy and altruism. Altruistic behaviors first become evident in children at the ages of 2 or 3, and when this is about the same time as a real interest in play develops. They will, for example, offer to help another child who is hurt, share a toy, or comfort another person. Children at this age are only beginning to understand that others have feelings different from them. However, they understand enough about emotions of others to respond in supportive and sympathetic ways that they see children or adults hurt or sad. The development of pro-social behavior shows a mixed pattern. Certain pro-social behaviors, such as taking turns in helpfulness, seem to increase with age, while others, such as comforting someone, seems to be more common among preschoolers and children in primary grades than among older children. Studies indicate that pro-social behavior in the preschool years tends to continue into adulthood. Not all children show equal amounts of altruistic behavior. Children who are able to regulate their emotions will tend to show more empathy and altruistic behavior. Pro-social behavior and emotional regulation are related to specific kinds of child rearing. Parents who create a warm and loving family climate, who give clear explanations and rules for what is appropriate and inappropriate, and who provide opportunities to be helpful, tend to have more altruistic children. Parental modeling of thoughtful and generous behavior is another contributing factor. Now let us look at the last part. Moral development. Morality refers to a set of principles or ideas that enables individuals to differentiate between right and wrong and to direct their behavior accordingly. The building blocks of moral development in the first few years of life are emotions, self-regulation, and conscience. Basically, children should learn 2 lessons. Firstly, to experience negative emotions when they violate rules, and secondly, to control their impulses to engage in prohibited behavior. Towards their second year of life, children already begin to show visible signs of distress, such as shame or guilt when they violate standards of behavior. This means that 18 to 20-month-old children are beginning to internalize rules and anticipate disapproval when they fail to comply with them. They are also able, but to a limited degree, to exert self-regulation in order to resist temptation and to make amends for wrongdoings. Signs of development of conscience. Reparative behaviors, such as trying to correct wrongdoing, seem to be linked with empathy, which develops even before the second year of life. Empathy in turn tends to be accompanied by pro-social behavior such as caring, helping, and comforting. Although temperamental traits such as the ability to regulate emotions play a role in moral development, parents contribute to moral socialization in many ways. A warm, secure attachment style, open discussion of children's behavior, establishment of rules, and acting on rule breaking contribute towards a child's sense of what is wrong and what is right. There we go. Thank you so much for listening to this video on social development. If you have any questions about this section or any things that you would like to contribute or would make this even better, please do send me an email at vincent@bacreate.com.